What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Coffee Travels, and this time we're talking about the best coffee in Vegas. So get your money ready. So maybe get your money ready to spend it at the coffee shop and not at the casino, because there's some really great coffee in Vegas. Going to talk all about the coffee shops that I visited while I was in Las Vegas. I was in Vegas for a week, and so going into this, generally if you visit Las Vegas, you're like, after 2 or 3 days, you're like, I gotta get out. But I must say, this is the first time I've actually really spent any time in or around kind of the locals area of Vegas, and it really kind of changed my perception on Las Vegas as a whole. So before we get into the coffee, the secret is out. Because my channel is all about bikes and coffee, the mountain bike community in Las Vegas is amazing. There are so many trails. I think the only downside that Vegas has for it is that it gets to 120 degrees in the summer. So, for maybe 4 or 5 months a year, you probably can't really ride unless you want to ride in the dark or, So I think that's really the only downside. But if you're looking for a great place to go mountain biking in the winter, spring, or fall, Vegas is where it's at. The people I was by myself, and so at every trail system I went to, I just went up and found some locals that were going riding and asked them where I should go. Everybody was so nice. The trails were fun. There were so many trails that I barely even scratched the surface. One day I did like 14 miles, kind of easy, but did find some like cool drops and jumps and stuff along that trail, but just kind of an easy 14 miles. Not a lot of elevation gain, like maybe 1,000 feet. And then the second day I did 6 miles in 2 hours and like 1,300 feet in elevation gain. Reminded me a lot of Dakota Ridge here in Colorado, which is really steep, really cheap. It was called this trail called Bone Sugar. And actually I got like a big, like 1-inch piece of cactus lodged in my arm. And even back to the locals, one of the guys was like nice enough to like pull it out for me because I couldn't get it. It like broke off at the skin and we couldn't get it out, and I couldn't get it out. So I was able to like hold it while he pulled it out for me. So again, Las Vegas mountain bike community, awesome. I definitely would ride there again. And if you're, again, looking for a cool place to go ride, definitely check it out. So let's get back to the coffee. So I visited, I think, like roughly 5 or 6 shops while I was in Las Vegas, and so let's get to them. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Coffee Class, which is kind of in, if I look at my map here, it's in the Paradise area, so it is in the kind of eastern side of Vegas. The Coffee Class. Coffee Class had decent coffee, so better than the Green Mermaid. Better than kind of your traditional mom and pop roasted, darker than night. But with most cafes that really have a strong food option or really focus on the food, the coffee kind of suffers. And then that was kind of my opinion with the Coffee Class. So it was good, but the cappuccino, the milk was way too hot. You couldn't even drink it. The milk wasn't really steamed that well. The coffee itself was good, but it wasn't like amazing. You could tell that the food kind of took precedence over the coffee, and so the coffee experience kind of lacks. So it's interesting that they call themselves the Coffee Class, because you think the coffee would kind of take precedent and then the food would be secondary, but I felt it was the other way. The food that I saw being served looked amazing, but again, the coffee then seemed to suffer a little bit. The other cafe that I went to was M&F Coffee Roasters, and this one the one I went to is out in Summerlin, so it wasn't the one that was up near downtown, and I think they have another location. I don't remember, I'll have to look at the map, but this one, again, it was clearly more of a breakfast place with a decent coffee offering. Again, the coffee was okay. If I had to choose between the Green Mermaid and M&F Coffee Roasters, I probably would go with M&F. However, wasn't my favorite. Again, very strong food menu, and again, I think the food menu when you focus that much on providing good food, the coffee then seems to suffer. I really haven't found a place that really focuses on food really well, but also really focuses on coffee really well outside of the Nordic countries. It seems that like places in like Iceland, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, those kind of countries, they kind of have the coffee side really dialed in. And so you can go to a restaurant and really get an amazing coffee experience as well as food. I haven't really found that in the States yet. So both the Coffee Class and M&F, decent coffee. If they're close to you, I would definitely get coffee there, and I would have meetings there if it was close, but it wouldn't be my first choice. So now let's talk about some of my favorites. This one is Sunrise, also kind of out near the airport in the Paradise area, really close. So it was the closest one I went to. So if you're staying on the Las Vegas Strip, it was the closest one that I went to. It was called Sunrise. The interesting thing about Sunrise is when I walked in, I realized that they were serving Mothership, and we'll talk about Mothership next. But when I walked in, I saw that they were serving Mothership coffee. But if you look right here, you will notice that the cappuccino is multiple sizes. So I just thought, okay, cool. It's somebody who's, maybe making a shift. They realize that they need to get better quality coffee in, and so they're bringing in Mothership, who's a local roaster, and they just don't really understand coffee yet. However, when I talked to the barista and I was like trying to describe to her what I wanted, because I wanted a cappuccino, so roughly 40 gram, 36 to 45 grams of espresso, 145 grams of roughly steamed oat milk. And she just didn't really know what it was. So I was kind of like, well, I just kind of want like a 6-ounce latte, a 5 or 6 ounce latte. And she's like, oh, like a cortado. Like, no, not a cortado. It's kind of like an even balance of espresso and milk. So, 40 or 50 grams of espresso and 40 or 50 grams of steamed milk. So I ended up getting a cortado. It wasn't bad. I knew the coffee would be decent because I had been to Mothership. But what is interesting is when I was trying to tell her that, and then I asked, I was like, oh, will you serve Mothership? She mentioned to me, well, yeah, it's the same ownership, which I don't understand how, and we'll talk about Mothership next, but how do you screw that up? Because the Mothership Cafe that I went to, again, in this Paradise area in kind of the southeastern side, I didn't go to the other locations, but that one was really good. I actually went there twice, and I actually took a couple of my colleagues with me, one who had never really had a specialty coffee experience, and another one who knows that I'm into coffee and wanted to come. So I actually took 2 people there. I went to the Mothership location twice, but that one they have it dialed. And so how do you have the same ownership but you get this wrong, where the coffee experience is just not the same and it's not the same level of quality? And I don't know. So I was really thinking about that. There could be a lot of reasons. Maybe one is potentially Sunrise is partially owned by the owners of Mothership, and the original owners are trying to bring them in to help them revamp. Maybe the Mothership owners just took it over just recently, and so they're kind of in the process of revamping this revamping Sunrise, and to not kind of lose all their customer base, they're kind of doing a slow turn and kind of changing the menu, bringing in the coffee, that sort of thing. So there are some reasons why it could potentially be that way, but I just didn't get it. If my fear is that they've owned it for a while, and it is just the Mothership owners, and for some reason, yeah, I don't get it. But it's business. There could be the nature of business is never easy, and so there's probably a million other reasons why they don't have that menu. So Mothership, if you see this, tell me why you just don't have it dialed in at Sunrise. If you really are the owner, why is it not the same quality of coffee at Sunrise that I would get at Mothership? Okay, so let's talk about Mothership. Now, Mothership came in a very close second in my favorite coffee shops, and there's one that is also on the same level, and we'll talk about that, but we're going to talk about Mothership first. So as I mentioned earlier, I went there twice. It was actually pretty close. It was only like a 10 or 15 minute drive from the Mandalay Bay, where I was at a conference, and so it was really easy to get to. The coffee experience was great. The coffee they're roasting is good. Really, my only complaint with Mothership is, if you own Sunrise, how do you mess that up? How is it that like you don't have a consistent coffee experience, and it's not as dialed as Sunrise? But that's really not a knock on Mothership, because I guess it's a separate company. I don't know. Anyways, so let's talk about Mothership. The coffee was really good. The people were really nice. And ironically, the first day I went there, there was a barista, and he was disabled. So like something had happened, and he didn't have a hand. I think it was on his right arm. But it was really cool. He had built this like really cool device to be able to set a cup in and lift it so that he could pour latte art. super cool. And if the ownership like helped him build that, or they're like, hey, we can figure out a way for you to still be a barista even though that you have this like pretty big disability, because when you're a barista you really work with your hands. That was really cool. I just thought it was really awesome to see somebody with a pretty major disability that may prevent you from working as a barista being able to make it work, and then having this really cool handmade, like crafted, and it wasn't done like cheaply, like it was kind of built really well and it looked really neat, and it was like this cool really like plate, and it allowed him to set the cup in, and then he could stick his arm under there and then lift the cup and pour. Yeah, super cool. I don't know, I just thought that was really awesome, a really unique touch. Doesn't really have an effect on the coffee, but it just speaks to the ownership of the organization, so I thought that was really cool. Another one that came in like a close second, third is Public Us, and they're up off Fremont Street, just kind of towards the, I guess, southeast of downtown, like how Fremont Street, it's like a weird angle, so I'm not really sure the direction, but Public Us, also really, really diverse and amazing bakery section. It also looked like they had really great food. I didn't have a cappuccino, so I really didn't get to honestly compare Public Us to the other cafes, because, you know, whenever I do a review, it's always about cappuccino, and to try to keep the experience the same and compare evenly one cafe to another. So why didn't I have a cappuccino? Well, when I went in, their only dairy alternatives were homemade like cashew and almond milk. I appreciate the idea of homemade milk alternatives, but first, for me personally, and I feel like most of the public, and you see that in the market and the demand for oat milk, almond milk just doesn't steam that great, and it doesn't taste that great. And especially if you're making it home, it can be very, if you're making it on your own, it can be very difficult. As somebody who has gone down this journey to try to understand, and who has been in process manufacturing and trying to develop a product, you know, you have to find the right oils to add into the milk to get the fats to kind of to blend and mix with the proteins to get that perfect bubbling microfoam. And plus, when nut milks get warm, they just don't taste great. Cashew milk, I love cashews, especially when cooking, as somebody who follows a vegetarian or plant-based diet. I love cashews because they do provide a great way to make cream alternatives, and there's some really amazing things you can do with cream. But my hang up with cashew milk is that, again, it's really hard to get the cashews ground fine enough. I've soaked cashews for days in warm water, and then when you grind them, it's still a little gritty. Again, and then you come back to the idea of being able to steam it right, and even with cashews, you can sometimes get this little bit of a weird nutty aftertaste. So I think right now, if you're going to have a dairy alternative, for me personally, and I feel the market is also showing us this, is that oat milk and soy milk are the ways to go. Unfortunately, they didn't have either one, and so I knew it wouldn't be a fair test, because I would get it and I just really wouldn't enjoy it, and all I would taste is the steamed hot nuttiness of the milk. So I went with a pour over, and I got a natural processed Ethiopian. So those of you that know me, you know I love natural processed Ethiopians, and the coffee actually was really good. The build out there is really amazing. It's in an interesting neighborhood that feels like it's going through the gentrification process. It's still a little rough around the edges, but they've kind of found them in this unique spot. And actually, as I drove up, I was like, is it open? Did like Google Maps send me the right way? I wasn't sure if it was even open. It looked like it was maybe under construction or slightly abandoned, until I got right up next to it, and then I could see that people were inside. But again, if they had an oat milk, I would be able to give a more honest opinion on the espresso side of things, because we know that espresso is 60% of the market, and so most drinks are espresso based. But the coffee I had was really good. No complaints there. The service was good. Their pastry menu looked phenomenal. So of all the ones that had a really extensive food menu and coffee menu, I feel like Public Us does it best. If they could just get a good oat milk in there, I feel like they would have something. They may be one of the first ones that I've been to that looks like they have a really decent food menu. Actually, and now as I'm thinking about it, I take that back. Iconic Coffee Roasters in Santa Fe, New Mexico, great food menu, offers a great dairy alternative, oat milk, great espresso that they roast. So I take that back. There is somebody that is doing a really good food menu as well as good coffee, and that's Iconic Coffee Roasters in Santa Fe, New Mexico. If you haven't seen my video on New Mexico coffee, check that out here. So finally, you've watched for 15, 16 minutes now. What was my favorite? And as most of you know, if you've watched these videos before, you can probably tell because I'm wearing their t-shirt. And it was Vesta Coffee Roasters. Ironically, this was the first one I went to. They're in this cool art neighborhood just outside of downtown. But the coffee experience was just really, really good. The cafe is really cool. I like that they have the roaster inside. Again, Mothership comes in a close second. I didn't go to their other locations, so I'm not sure if they're roasting offsite or if they're roasting on-site. But when you get big enough and you have multiple locations, you can't have a roaster in every cafe. But for Vesta, I thought it was really cool that the roaster was there. The coffee was spot on. The espresso was, cocoa-y, but yet sweet enough to cut through the milk. They had an oat milk. Great experience overall, great build out. Not much else I can say there. And again, they had pastries and stuff, but they weren't heavily focused on food. They were really focused on the coffee, which I love. So the winner of best coffee in Vegas for me was Vesta Coffee Roasters. Mothership comes in a very close second. And then Public Us, if they would just get an oat milk, maybe one of my favorite places as well, because they would have the food menu really dialed in as well as the coffee. So that's it. So if you liked this video, hit that like button. If you want to learn more about my coffee reviews or best coffee cafes in different cities, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you'll get notified when a new video comes out. And so until next time, coffee, pedal, repeat.